But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
You ever get the feeling that everything in America is completely fucked up? You know that feeling that the whole country is like 1 inch away from saying, that's it, forget it. Let's see,
Hey, twist around. Now look, here's a house full of bees. You think the honey badger cares? It doesn't give a shit.
Listen, let's get one thing straight.
Price is right.
Guns don't kill people. I do.
I wanna tell you a story. Ain't got no characters in it but me. I wanna sing you a sad song. Most of it I don't expect you to believe. Starts off just a whiskey and wine, on some miles of travel and some real good times, but it ends in a dark corridor where there ain't no windows and there ain't no doors. Well, that's me.
So check out Liberty Tree Podcast.
Just a drinking off this bottle and a drifting out to sea. Oh, that's me.
Gold jacket, green jacket.
Just a sitting here staring and a shaking like a leaf. Oh, that's me.
I think some apologies are in order.
Just a...
I just lost a bet with myself. I thought because the weather here has sucked.
Yes.
It's just been cold and raining, miserable. Actually, we had flooding here yesterday. Yeah. Is that now today it's bright and sunny?
Yeah.
That you were going to kind of bring something like some summertime rock.
Good day, sunshine, ba-doo.
No. But
that goes on my list.
But in my head, I was like, it wasn't going to be a conscious decision. Is that we kind of threw this together, like this podcast today. We kind of like decided at the last second, or both our days kind of fell through.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would think like there's going to be this subconscious thing in his head, like he's going to play like some Boston deep cut or something like that.
Not yet. Yeah. The problem with doing that is that right around this time of every year, mid-February, mid to late February, you get a just killer 80-degree weekend.
Yeah.
And you're out there with shorts, shirt off, you're like, sweet, winter's over. Sun's out. That's it. That was a hard winter, but we're through it. And then the next weekend, you just get slammed with rain and freezing weather. It'll snow between now and spring. So I didn't want to do that to you and get your hopes up with this nice weather. So I played something pretty mellow to bring you down a little.
I remember we had to...
I can tell you're getting a little excited. It's nice weather.
I remember we had to... It was in a band. We were recording an album. We had to move to Boston, and like during one of their like wintertime. And we were right across the street from Harvard, so I guess we were in Cambridge technically. And it was freezing. And Californians were not the most resilient people when it comes to weather, like
or anything else.
Yes, it's very true. You know, you go to the East Coast and you're like, oh my God. And so we're heater cranked. We're staying in this apartment, beanies, sweatshirts on, you know, everything. And then like it was one of those rare days in the winter where the sun comes out and there's still snow everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like 48 degrees outside. We look across the street at the campus.
Yeah.
And all the students are out there with no shirt on.
Sunbathing.
Laying in lawn chairs. We're just like shivering in our apartment. I'm like, Californians are not tough. Like we've had a very easy life weather-wise here.
So we haven't podcasted in a while. It's been 2 weeks.
So have we done that? Have we done this since going to Mexico?
No.
Oh, really? That we did.
We did 2 episodes in one day when we had Bill Ferguson on.
Right.
So then Tunnel Talk came out while we were gone. We haven't podcasted since then. So apologies. We're actually, I think that we might be doing things a little bit differently going forward. There's a chance that there'll be a few more hiccups in the schedule because you and I talked about trying to do a few things to try to grow our listenership.
Right.
So if anyone is bummed out by that, we apologize, but hopefully you see the value in us trying to grow the podcast. And before, did you have something to say on that?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Please follow us, by the way, on Twitter. Matt has been just tearing it up at Liberty Up a Tree on Twitter.
Something has happened to the algorithm because you started the Twitter account.
Yeah.
When we started the podcast, started the company, Liberty Tree. I think it began with a store.
Yeah.
Right. And then we did the podcast come shortly after?
Right after. Yeah.
Okay. Right after. And then you created a Twitter account.
Yep.
And then you had me handle the Twitter stuff. I think we both.
We were both doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We both were.
You're way better at it though.
Yeah. And I checked out after. And so I didn't touch the Twitter for 2 years, something like that. And then we decided, like, let's try to get back on there. And when I first got back on there, we're under the same account, but our timelines were vastly different. It was like something I did, like my whole algorithm is screeching leftist.
Yeah.
And then it like switched. It got like really sweet for a while. I was getting some like kind of out there stuff, getting the occasional like flat earth stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, now here we go. And for something's happened in the last 2 weeks, it switched back.
To the leftist stuff?
Yeah.
Well, Twitter is fucking, I don't know how interesting it is to hear about the Twitter sphere, but it is just like losing its collective mind over Doge and Trump and Elon. And I mean, it is just the freak out it's so extreme that it makes me have to like put my head up out of the water and be like, this isn't reality, right?
Right.
Like you start to think like, wait, are people really?
Put it down. And the only reason I'm on there is for the podcast. And I find like really cool stuff. Like that dude, Ian Carroll.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have found him otherwise. Like he's magnificent.
Yeah.
Says some amazing stuff. But yeah, it's such a cesspool, such a negative, like awful sphere to be in that you put your phone down and I walk outside and I'm like, everything's fine. This weather sucks, but everything's kind of fine.
Right.
What a perverted, dark game you have to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because ever since Elon took over, we have way fewer interactions on Twitter. You probably wouldn't have noticed this because you didn't start until, but I think all of our previous like interactions were with bots.
Yeah.
It's much more organic now. It's not necessarily healthier.
No.
But it is organic. I don't know. There's something, it's cool. I don't know. It's kind of fun. Like trying to say the right thing. This is boring. Anyways, I'm having fun with it. It seems like you are too. I would recommend people follow us at Liberty Up a Tree.
I like it because it makes me think it makes me establish like different parameters for how to communicate. Because I love doing deep dives and sit there and go into this and this and this. I'm like, I have to get this very abstract and complex point across in a half of a paragraph. Go. And it's got to be fun.
It's got to be fun.
It's got to be fun. Because no one cares about like, according to this graph, like,
which is really hard not to do the pedantic, like, well, technically, if you look back in 1970, it's like, so that song that I played.
Oh.
That we should touch on because I played it for a reason. You know who that was?
No.
Devil Makes Three.
Oh, okay.
Remember, they were pretty big like in the early 2000s.
Yeah, you were into them for a while. I think I found out about them from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, way back when.
Pretty cool band. I haven't listened to them since back then, but what made me play them was that I had this interaction with a friend of mine recently who brought up this interaction that he had when he was on a trip with some people recently. And I'm going to keep all the names kind of vague because I think they listen to the podcast and I don't want to offend any of them. But I was at the Toad one time and
which was our old local.
Yeah.
Our old neighborhood.
The Devil Makes Three came on the playlist because it was just the time where that would happen. And I remember saying to one of our friends, we started talking about it. And this friend was telling me, he's like, you like these guys? I was like, yeah, I think they're kind of cool. He's like, yeah, I do too. I told him, I was like, they're kind of punk rock. And
I think I remember this.
And I said that because I just felt like they were doing things in a little bit of a DIY style, and they were kind of rejecting certain molds and singing about topics that were kind of dark and not like what you would normally hear in that, what would you call that music? Like folky kind of poppy folk that was popular.
Yeah, there's this whole kind of flash in the pan. I think it's still going on, but everyone liked to dress up like a Pensive coal miner and not have any electric instruments. Some were good, some were bad.
It didn't matter what band you were in; you had to have someone playing the banjo.
It could be plugged in or not, right? Either way.
And he said to me, he was like, "Punk rock, like that's ridiculous. There's nothing like punk rock." I was like, "Well, I don't know. I think that they have, this. And he goes, "You just like to argue, don't you?" I'm like, "Motherfucker."
Okay, you do.
Yes, right. I absolutely do like to argue, but you contradicted.
But I'm right this time.
He brought up the band. I said they were kind of punk rock, and then he said, "Oh, you just like to argue." It's like, you're the one that disagreed with me.
Fair point.
I was just saying I thought they were punk rock. You decided to disagree with me. When I come back and give you a retort to what you said in an argument, then I'm the one that likes to argue.
Yeah.
What I started, so that goes, I'm carrying that with me for years, right? Just seething. Not really. But the other day, I was talking to my buddy who went on this trip with some friends. And while they were away on this trip, the topic of the NFL came up. Mm-hmm. They were watching soccer, and one of his friends, a female,
Isn't a Super Bowl coming up or something?
Yeah.
Who's in it?
This weekend.
Who's in it?
The Chiefs and the Eagles.
Oh, I thought they just... Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I would be happy to go into this more with you, but I don't think you really want to have this conversation. And so this friend of ours told my buddy, he said, "I like Premier League soccer because it just seems so much more inclusive to women."
Your buddy said this.
No, this woman said that to him, that the Premier League soccer is so much more inclusive to women.
It's all men playing.
Right. But fandom.
Okay.
Like they want to include women in their fandom.
Okay.
And so
who's their Taylor Swift?
It's a very good question. So he said, and by the way,
Posh Spice.
Okay, so Taylor Swift comes up. So basically he argues this. He wants to know, like, well, what do you mean? How is it more inclusive? And I think he probably brought up like Taylor Swift. And I said, well, and then they actually, before I tell you what I said, they all kind of ganged up on him and said, "You just want to argue about everything," right? So kind of like a similar situation that I was in. And he really wanted to understand where they were coming from.
Right.
Because it at first seemed kind of ridiculous to him. Like the NFL, if women don't love the NFL, is that because the NFL is not inclusive to women? If women don't love the UFC, is that because the UFC is not being inclusive to women? Or could it also be that sport doesn't appeal to women? Not many people play football, American football.
Right.
Not many women participate in beating the crap out of each other. So I started telling him, I was like, dude, Taylor Swift could very well be a psyop being perpetrated by the CIA,
which I think we've touched on
American public. Yes, we have. And I started telling him about MK Ultra and how there is this program that the military and the CIA definitely actually perpetrated on soldiers called MK Ultra, where they tried to fuck them up with drugs and God knows what else to break them down in a way that they could control them.
Yeah, I think at that time, just to give the kind of premise for what you're bringing up, is that the degree to which how accurate this is, who knows? I still believe we've gone deep in the MK Ultra stuff, and I think we're getting like 4% of the story. The only reason we know about the MK Ultra programs is because they accidentally filed something. Some low-level file clerk, I think in Texas, found it in like a congressional library. It's like, what's this? And he's like looking through it, going like, holy shit!
You mean a traitor to America?
Yes, and Edward Snowden or Ross Ulbricht, and which gave us the Church Commission under the Ford administration. But what originally the impetus for that program beginning is that we got back our POWs from Korea, and and they grilled them, and they said like, what was it like? They actually treated us pretty well, and it's a nice country, to be honest with you. And the Pentagon went like, oh shit, they got mind control programs, and we're entering the Soviet Cold War.
Yeah.
And we go like, okay, so that was like the superpower that we were worried about. Like they have some kind of mind control program.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about the soldiers from the back.
Yeah, that began the MK Ultra programs of like, we need to develop our own mind control program or we're going to lose the Cold War.
Right.
And so we started blasting random people with LSD and beating the shit out of them and locking them in the dark to see if we'll see what happens. And that gave us Ted Kaczynski and Whitey Bulger and Charles Manson.
Dude, sidebar.
Okay.
There's a show right now on Prime called Beast Games that is fucking fascinating.
Really?
There's 1,000 people all competing to win this $5 million pile of money that they show continuously throughout the show. And they have to eliminate it from 1,000 down to 1, obviously, right? And the way that they do it is through
bestiality.
No.
Okay.
Good guess, though, based on the name. I can see where you got there. Is through all sorts of fucking, like, psychological...
Next up is the pangolin from Mulan. Oh, no. I'm out.
I'm good. I'm vaccinated. So they do it through basically, like, the most fucked up psychological torture.
Oh, really?
Essentially. It doesn't seem like that. And I think... a lot of people could be forgiven for not noticing that that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
But that is what they're doing. The game show is interesting for what it actually exposes about random people and how willing they are to lie and cheat and bully other people.
Oh, really?
Or be totally honest and be noble and be truthful. It's fucking crazy. Like, who gives a shit about the money? Like, I'm in it for the Stanford prison experiment shit that they do through it. It's crazy, dude. You should watch it.
So give me an example. Like, what's something they do?
I don't want to ruin it for you, but
Okay. I'm not
okay. There, you probably won't watch it. So, spoiler alert for anyone else is planning on watching it.
If you can help me figure out how to turn my TV on, I might give it a try.
Every once in a while, you do watch the things I tell you to watch. Yes, so this
is true.
When you do, this will be spoiled for you. But so they break up the remaining contestants, however many hundred people it is, into groups of 3, and they send them to a room. And this room is like a 10 by 10 box. It's all white on the inside. There's nothing in there except for a red phone and a chain hanging from the wall with a handcuff on the end of it.
Okay.
On the phone, so there's 3 people in each room.
Right.
You can pick up the phone and request anything in the world that you want.
Really?
People were ordering horses. Fucking tattoo artists came in. They're stuck in this room for 5 hours. Now, the game is that at the end of the 5 hours, you have to pick one person to be locked to the handcuff on the wall. The other 2 people get to continue the game. That one person is out of the game.
With whatever else was brought in at the behest of the people.
You don't get to keep the horse.
Oh,
you keep the tattoo. If you can order a pizza, that's what I gathered from it. Because I was like, well, why not just order the $5 million? And then, so I'm gathering you don't get to keep that. And so you have to convince one of the people in the room to handcuff themselves to the wall, and then the other 2 people get to go on to the next round of the game.
Interesting.
And so in some of the rooms, and then if you don't convince someone, all 3 people are out of the game.
Okay, I follow you.
And so they're in these rooms for 5 fucking hours with nothing but what they order on the phone or just themselves like bullying each other into locking themselves to the
That's crazy.
wall. It's fucking nuts, dude.
So if
in one of the rooms,
so if you ordered the Spin Doctors, everyone else, those other 2 people would have to listen to Spin Doctors playing live for dude,
lock yourself to the wall, turn it off.
Dude, on tour right now. Spin Doctors, Blues Traveler, and the Gym Blossoms.
Holy shit.
I got multiple texts from people like, dude, did you manifest this in some dream or something? I was like, we kind of got to go, right?
Wow. Yeah.
My wife, I was like, she doesn't care. I was like, oh my God, dude, look at this tour. This is insane. Yeah. It's like the 90s music for people who don't like music kind of tour. And
bust out your Doc Martens and some flannel. Tie a sweater around your waist.
And I said, she goes, who's the Gym Blossoms? I was like, dude, the Gym Blossoms actually had some bangers.
Really?
I was like, do you remember the song Hey Jealousy from the night? Like, Oh, dude, it's a great song.
Come on, dude.
You know what's sad about the Gin Blossom Zone?
No.
Is that their original guitar player, wrote all the hits. And then they kicked him out because he crazy alcohol problem. And right after that.
Not because he wouldn't take the COVID shot.
No, this is pre-COVID. Okay. Allegedly, and then they got super big and ended up committing suicide.
Allegedly.
Which ties us into
no.
CIA.
Okay. Going back. Okay, so going back to this discussion, we were talking about MK Ultra. I said that's obviously, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that that's not the only thing that the CIA has tried to do in terms of mind control over the public, because you can't just dose the entire country with LSD and torture them very easily, right? That's becomes kind of obvious. And I said, I think that Taylor Swift could be an example of that. No proof, just throwing it out there. A lot of people have suggested that. And then it dawned on me. I was like, dude, when you brought up this counterpoint to what they were talking about, all of them ganged up on you and said, oh, you just like to argue. And I said, that in and of itself, I think, is a form of mind control. Because what do we know about the word argue? If you tell someone that you got into an argument with someone else, they immediately think in their heads like, oh, did you like get in a fist fight? Like, no, we had an argument, like a intellectual discussion about a topic.
Yeah, I think argument's kind of a loaded term, because if you said, I went to lunch and had a debate with something, which also has it's a fair amount of negative connotations. But argument is, when I think of argument, I mean, this could be my own personal bias. When I think of argument, it's two people not, like, kind of two ships in the night missing each other. Like, I'm not listening to what you're saying. Like, I'm here to repeat my point over and over. You're doing the same thing. Right. And it goes nowhere. That's what I think when I think debate, like, okay, here's my point, here's your point. Let's bounce back and forth. So I want to understand where you're coming from, which I don't think necessarily comes in an argument.
Okay. So I think that the term argument has been co-opted intentionally to say that if two people are trying to actually discuss the merits of an idea, that all of a sudden that is now an argument, and therefore it is negative. Because the enemy to all of the horrible things that the political elites have forced upon us in the last decades of, 50 years, 70 years, the enemy to that is truth. They are constantly on the lookout for truth breaking out, and they're deeming it misinformation. They're trying to censor us. And this idea of the argument has become negative, because an argument is the best way for people to come to an enlightened perspective on something. Two people discussing a point back and forth.
That's funny that you bring this up, because I did it randomly. I don't know how I got here, but I was doing a deep dive on the Founding Fathers. And we have this illusion, we were taught, through our government school program, and just these, there's this kind of picture that's painted of the Founding Fathers, these wise men getting together and like bringing up the greatest system of government so far that we've had in world history. They vehemently argued. They like hated each other. They didn't get along. They didn't agree on anything. All that stuff that resulted in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution came through like months and months and months of like vicious arguments.
I don't know that they all hated each other.
Well, they hate each other.
That might be, in some cases they did probably, but like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were really good friends, and then they kind of had a, falling out, but they always respected each other.
Over quartering troops, probably.
Yeah, over the Alien and Sedition Act for sure. Over war, which is something that we're facing today. And if you try to get into a discussion, I just had a conversation today on the phone with my favorite lefty, and it was very civil. And she immediately knew in her heart that everything that Elon Musk and Doge were doing was bad. And we were able to have a discussion over it, which is very unique. Usually it devolves into, oh, I don't want to argue. You just want to argue all the time. You got to be the smartest person in the room. I don't want to argue with you. And that's what we were talking about just before we started recording with that person that who's kind of a just totally spinning out lefty.
Yeah, right.
And it's like what you want to do is talk to that person about all of these horrible points that they're bringing up and say, hey, does this actually make sense to you? Look at this and this and this. And their knee-jerk reaction is, oh, you just want to argue, or I don't want to argue with you. I'm not going to go there with you, because they have been programmed, my theory, to believe that argumentation is not an effective way to actually have to come to a conclusion. That if you're arguing with someone, you're fighting with them, and that you should hate them and they probably hate you, instead of actually having this conversation, being brave enough and humble enough to have a conversation about these points that you don't agree with. And I think that's been done intentionally, because people doing what the founding fathers did, arguing in the street, arguing in the pub, having civil discourse, disagreeing but not going to blows, is the enemy of falsehood.
I would agree with that, because this is something that I noticed. This is kind of funny that it ties into this, but we went to Mexico, and one of the reasons that we went there, how many were there of us? 27 people?
Yeah, something like
a lot of people. And one of the reasons is, by whatever stroke of luck, myself and 70% of my wife's family, all our birthdays are right now.
Right.
Like in February, including my mother-in-law, who celebrated her 80th birthday. And she is one of my favorite people in the entire world. And we all kind of went around, and I don't even remember the birthday party, just said something like that we loved about her.
Yeah.
And the first thing
which was very hard to do.
I did
not because I didn't have anything to say, but because
I did not think my allergies would hit up that hard in Mexico.
God, when we had to, your wife had us all write down one thing we love about her mom and one thing that we learned from her on a piece of paper, and I just assumed we were handing that over for her to read later.
No. You're public speaking, deeply emotional speech.
Oh my God, fighting back the tears.
But the first thing that I thought of when I was writing on my card, I was like, okay, what? I was like, oh, I know. First thing is that she has this grace and open-mindedness, and she's a lefty. But every time she'll bring up something, I'm like, well, the other side to that, here's the other side to that, right? And she's always like deeply intellectually curious.
She is.
Looks you right in the eyes and like, oh, like tell me more like that.
Right.
Tell me more about that. My mom's the same way, which is why I love just like having these conversations. Like, because you trust me, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. It's not even political. Just could be anything, right? I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right. I'm just saying, like, here's how I see that issue. And I think it's almost like a generational thing. Because it's hard. It's getting harder and harder to find. I don't know if this is like with the internet and everything, it could be like one of those things. But I think she comes from a generation. Like, I'm just open to hear the ideas. I want to hear like the other side.
I think that totally confirms what I'm saying. That even the idea of bringing this up with someone, it's like, ooh, I don't want to argue. I don't want to, but instead of like just saying like, no, we're just having a discussion.
Right.
Because there is this negative connotation put on it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
You
agree?
Bobby did Loindeo.
Who did?
Loindeo. Bobby did Loindeo.
Who did?
So, quick Mexico recap.
Okay.
We all went. We stayed at this crazy resort, which is always bizarre. One surprising thing, very, very few Americans there. It was almost all Canadians and Euros.
Right. We were not the dominant foreigner.
Yeah. And food, not so good.
Did you eat at the steakhouse?
Which is, no. Was it good?
Oh, my God, dude. The braised short ribs.
Really?
I don't know if they're braised, but the beef short ribs.
Yeah.
Whew.
Nice.
Outstanding. Best meal of the whole trip.
It was kind of interesting because I think they cater to whatever their clientele is, which is mostly Canadians and Euros.
Who they assume don't like Mexican food.
Right.
Because you can't find it there.
Us here in California, what 90% of your diet's Mexican food.
Yeah.
And, we have us being a border state, as you would expect, very, very large presence, where we are here in Northern California.
If you were just judging the resort on the food and you couldn't tell anything else, you would assume that you were vacationing in England.
Right. It was funny. One of the first things my wife said when we got home, she goes, "Oh God, thank God we're home. We can get some Mexican food."
That's so funny.
Kind of funny. But then I thought that, we have excellent Mexican food here in Northern California, but it's not totally Mexican food. It's like California food, which is almost Mexican food.
Which you can't find.
There's no burritos down in Mexico.
It's
you ask
really
for a burrito,
hard.
they're going to bring you a small donkey.
Exactly. It's very hard to find Mexican food.
Which, if you're on that game show and if that's what you wanted,
you can get to
spend 5 hours with a small donkey. But it was nice to be home. And I think that one of the highlights of the trip is we had an agreement that we were going to train as much as we could down there. We brought all the Muay Thai stuff, and we brought our rash guards. We'll just figure out something. Worst case scenario, we find a patch of grass and reenact murder after a couple drinks. And then I got there first, so I went to the gym to scope it out, and I found this dude was standing there in the corner wearing Muay Thai shorts. Didn't know much English. Like, you knew a fair amount. I said, Muay Thai? And he goes, "Sí, son."
So you said, made sure you said it in a Mexican accent?
It's like my old boss. I was like, just because you're yelling at the concrete guy using a Spanish accent, he still doesn't know what you're saying.
Muay Thai? I don't know. Muay Thai?
Muay Thai?
Yeah, of course. That's like the buffet.
Yeah,
So I show up, and before we even get our room, because there's this line from hell to get checked in, because one of those tour buses had just pulled up. One of the dudes is like, just go get a drink and come back. It's going to be like an hour before all these people get their rooms. So I'm walking through the resort with the family, and I asked this lady, "Where's the buffet?" And she's like, "Buffet? Like, I don't." She's like, "Oh, the buffet?" It's like, "Oh, of course. Yes." Sorry, I totally mispronounced that.
Can you try and meet me halfway on this one?
Work with me, people.
But anyway, shout out Reyes. Reyes Roque is the name. Him and I and this French Canadian dude just got after it every day that I was there, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I don't know, through maybe like a lack of translation, he posted a picture of us training together, and he says, "Thanks for coming and coaching." And so now I'm getting quite a bit of pushback about that.
Oh, are you?
By no means should I be teaching Muay Thai. I'm an enthusiast.
Yes.
But I don't know. Because you get these French Canadian housewives that come in and they want to do like cardio. And he did ask me, he's like, "Can you just like show them like how to throw a jab?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." So technically I was kind of coaching a little bit. But if you just looked, and I didn't post that on social media. He said, "Join this conversation," because I want to stay in touch with him.
Right.
And I gave him my Muay Thai pads at the end. Yeah, but by doing that, it linked it to my social media, which I don't post anything on social media.
No.
So now people think I'm like trying to flex, like I'm a Muay Thai coach, which I'm certainly not.
I love that happened.
Oh, gym drama. Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
Have you, dude, a little bit of local news here. Have you heard about the schools that they're trying to shut down in Santa Rosa?
Yes.
One of them is the one near you.
My wife was actually on the Zoom hearings at the city council or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them is the high school near me. Mm-hmm. Montgomery High School.
Right.
Now, living near this high school, I get to experience the kids from the high school walking around when school gets out.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'll go into Lucky's supermarket and like mill about the store and steal shit while I'm in there. And the caliber of...
We're getting old.
Well, dude, Lucky's has to hire a security guard to be in the store while the kids get out of school. During the summer, no security guard.
Yeah.
During the middle of the day, no security guard.
In fact,
when the kids get out of school, they have to have a fucking security guard in the store because they steal so much shit from them.
Most stores around... If they're around a school, they'll have a policy and a sign in front. It says no more than 3 kids at a time. You have to leave your backpacks at the counter.
They should do that. Something like that. But it's sad that that's... Now, if my kid's school was next to a supermarket and all those kids went in, it would improve the situation in the store by having them there because they're all such good, upstanding, God-fearing children. The kids that go to Montgomery High School, sorry to offend any of you, are not. Mm-hmm. And you just watch them, like they'll cross the street at the intersection by the school, head down, shuffling, looking at their phone, not paying attention to traffic at all. And just when there's like an opening in the traffic, another kid will run out and block traffic for everyone. Like zero courtesy about anyone else in the world besides themselves. Just selfish as can be.
Or their own personal safety.
And I'm not suggesting necessarily that the school needs to be teaching these kids to be good people, because I think that's their parents' job. Mm-hmm. But it makes you wonder, like, what the fuck are they teaching them in that school?
Yeah.
Is what they're teaching them more valuable than them being good people?
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'd rather have some kid that could read on the average reading level coming out of the school, which probably most of them are below average, and do math at an average level, but be a good person, then come out of the school being a douchebag, but has high test scores.
Which they don't.
I don't care about that. I want our society to benefit.
If you look at the test scores of California, they don't have either.
No. And we're paying money to educate these kids, more money than any other state pays per student. And we're turning out.
I think in California, we spend twice the national average.
If we're spending that money, I feel like it should be benefiting our society in some way. But instead, these kids are just shitbags. Mm-hmm. Maybe they'd be worse without that school. You can make that argument if you like to argue. But I don't.
Which is a psyop.
Yeah. But I don't see it. And so they're now talking about shutting down that school, which I am not opposed to.
So what's the, I have like a marginal understanding of this because I just don't really pay attention to it, but what was the fundamental reason they're talking about closing down like 6 schools or something like that?
Low enrollment. And lack of funds.
And I think a lot of the campuses are extremely antiquated and run down.
And the kids are murdering each other in those schools.
Okay, let's not get hung up on the small stuff.
There was one murder last year at this school.
At Montgomery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
Fights, like gang fights all the time.
Yeah.
There. It's like, yeah, it's not working. Giving you more money is not fixing this problem.
It's like an underage Waffle House.
All right, so check out this picture I took. So this is a 3-story, it's a 4-story building that they're building right next to Montgomery High School. They're enlarging the campus right now and investing.
While talking about shutting it down?
Yes. Investing God knows how many millions of dollars into this building on the campus. And I'm like, what the fuck? You don't have the budget. You don't have the enrollment, but we're spending taxpayer money on this giant fucking building.
I gotta say, that building looks a lot like low-income housing apartments.
Dude, please don't even suggest that. And it just makes me think, like, what the fuck? Like, it's the exact same reason why Doge in the federal government is having a easy time, a heyday, cutting down on all this government waste is things like this. Like, you're going to shut down this school and then you're building this brand new building. And the excuse that I heard is like, well, they might turn it into a charter school or an after school program thing. It's like, why did they build this? They obviously built this building on some sort of justification that we needed it to make kids smarter, right? That would be the justification.
Right.
No. It's just because we have extra money to spend and we're increasing the administration and we have a budget. If we don't spend it, we lose it. It's like, fuck off. Shut down this school. Shut down all the fucking schools. Have no more public schools in Santa Rosa for all I care. Have the kids figure it out. Have the parents figure it out. Do something that you actually have to pay money to send your kid to a school, have them actually respect being there, have them learn something, have the parents volunteer there if you have to, like they do at our school. Like the whole thing is just a fucking disaster. And and they're putting up signs all around my neighborhood on the telephone poles, like save Montgomery High School.
Yeah, I'm seeing those around our neighborhood too.
You are marketing to the wrong people. No one in this neighborhood wants you to save Montgomery High School. You should be putting those in other neighborhoods because everyone here is like, fuck those kids. I'm not giving them enough
one size that says teenagers with like the red slash.
It's like the time when, do you remember when you used
teenagers,
to have to... No. And get off my lawn. Do you remember when you used to have to drive through Willits?
Yes.
And then they built a big bypass. So now you just zip right past it. It used to take forever. There's traffic and fucking it was horrible. And I remember one holiday weekend coming back from Humboldt County, and traffic was backed up for fucking miles coming into Willits.
Yeah.
And it was right about the time when they were starting to build the bypass, and there were a bunch of people out there protesting the bypass. Like, don't do the bypass. The wetlands are in danger. And everyone's sitting there stuck in the worst traffic of their lives. I'm like, I don't think this is your market.
So, know your audience.
Same goddamn thing. All right. Enough of local news. You've been watching, I know you want to talk about the surveillance state.
Yeah. Want to get into that?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
hold on. Have you watched the Tulsi Gabbard confirmation stuff? Did you have anything to say about that?
No, I have no idea what's going on.
Well, let me just say real quickly, because I think this ties in with that. Tulsi Gabbard is a person who was promising to reform the security apparatus. Stop our government from spying on Americans. Section 702 of FISA ruling says that the government can spy on Americans. They will never admit that. They will never say that in the hearings when she is testifying before the National Security assembly of the senators. Yeah. Like, they don't bring that up. They just call it this very important section of FISA that allows us to spy on our adversaries. But that's not what it is. 702 is so that people can spy, the government can spy on Americans.
Oh, you are just pitching me up softballs right now.
She is,
love it.
She has been totally opposed to this. And now she's the person that's going to be voted on to be confirmed to actually do something about it. And they fucking hate it. She's so clearly right over the target.
Right.
Because of how much they're going after her on this thing. There was this moment in the hearings where they
just to harken back to some things we brought up before. It's like when you see whatever X chunk of the power hierarchy come after someone, as we always say, that it's usually because they're pretty close to being directly above the target.
Right.
Or as we say it, like the podcasters or the social media platforms, everything, the people that got canceled, like during COVID, for example.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they're spreading misinformation. Like, okay, like what about the guy who has the Bigfoot channel on YouTube?
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't care about that.
No, that's a misinformation, isn't it?
Yeah. But the guy questioning the vaccine, he just lost his channel.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now I got to look into this.
So listen to this little bit of her opening statement.
Now, before I close, I want to warn the American people who are watching at home. You may hear lies and smears in this hearing that'll challenge my loyalty to and my love for our country. Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States. Accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters.
Guru Gate didn't last very long.
I know.
They threw it out there and it was like, okay, like
yeah. The language
slicing it a little thin.
The language they tried to use too was that she was a cult member and some offshoot of Hare Krishnas, which I looked into it. She's not.
Right.
Like, it's pretty much just Hinduism.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know anything about Hinduism, there's a lot of gurus, and that's so the fact that you're following a guru just means that you're basically being a Hindu.
Usually a big fan of peace, for example.
Totally. God forbid.
The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed. The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet.
Boom!
I have no love for Assad or Gaddafi or any dictator. I just hate Al-Qaeda. I hate that.
So
was she, bring me up to speed here, was she confirmed? There was some kind of fuckery involved, right?
She has not been confirmed. I'll be shocked if she gets confirmed. They tried to get her to pledge allegiance to Section 702 of the FISA Act. And
allegiance to a FISA ruling?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which she said before this hearing that she did. Mm-hmm. But in this hearing, she never did. Like she kind of stood her ground on it. Mm-hmm. And I kind of think she's probably in her own mind like 50-50 that she'll get confirmed. But what's pretty admirable about what she's doing is she's just saying fuck off to these people to some degree. She's not going to call Ed Snowden a traitor. She's not going to pledge allegiance to the ability of the spying apparatus to be able to spy on American citizens. And she's kind of saying like, fuck it, don't confirm me. But at least I'm here in this hearing being able to expose this stuff and kind of push back on you fucking weirdos.
She's using it as a platform.
You know, it came up when we were all texting back and forth, you, me, and Jake, that these hearings are like WWE, right? It's a total just show.
Yeah.
And it always has been. But what's a little bit different this time around with people like RFK Jr.
I would argue that the FISA proceedings are also WWE. Because once you look into the surveillance state and the way that it kind of works, which we'll get into today, I'm like, these FISA court proceedings are completely irrelevant.
You mean because it's just like a rubber stamp for...
Well, no, like I see it as like a limited hangout. They're saying like, oh, we're going to hold like FISA, we're going to hold their feet, we're going to like push back and really start to audit what we're doing. And you're going like, they're spying on everybody all the time.
Well, it always has been, right? And all of these, whenever there's a confirmation hearing, not just this year, but previously, they go through this kind of dog and pony show and they act tough and they, you know, make you, you know, really hold your feet to the fire. And it's total.
With the exception of Bernie Sanders asking RFK, do you condemn this onesie? Will you condemn this onesie right here? At these proceedings, you're like, what am I watching right now?
Okay, so any normal year, like the person that's sitting in RFK's seat is just going to go, yes, I do condemn that, or they're going to have some way to kind of agree but disagree, but you know, move along, and they play the game, right?
Yeah.
This time around, it's the equivalent of a WWE match where one of the contestants picks up like a bottle, like one of those fake bottles, and smashes it over the other guy's head. And instead of falling down and holding his face, the guy just stands there and just like, it was a fucking fake bottle.
Yeah.
What are you going to do now? And that guy might not win the fight, but all of a sudden it's a real fight. And he's like, fuck you, I'm not falling down. Yeah, you are. And they get in a fight. The guy still might lose, but all of a sudden it's turned into a real fight. And in these two, actually three, with Kash Patel, RFK, and Tulsi Gabbard, in these three hearings, like, the dudes asking the questions, the senators are squirming in their chairs. They're like, what the fuck? Like, we have never been faced with this before. This is like, they're getting a dose of reality thrown at them. So whether or not she gets confirmed, what's happening here is fascinating because they are not backing down to the deep state. I think it's the first time that we've ever seen that. It's kind of cool. It still is this WWE thing, but they're just standing there going, no, I'm not going to fucking fall down. Like, take your fake fucking champagne bottle and shove it up your ass. So this is the dude from the Democrat from Colorado, Everett, I think his name is, trying to make Tulsi Gabbard call Ed Snowden a traitor.
To answer these questions and for your service.
Yeah, Michael Bennett.
Was Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, I will also repeat my answer. He broke the law.
You said earlier that you were offended by a question that my colleague from Kansas asked, which I think was his duty as somebody on this committee to fulfill his responsibility to advise and consent. We are not here to be a rubber stamp for the President of the United States. So let me ask you again, do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden like Lee.
Media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the chief intelligence officer of this nation. As my colleague said, this is not about you. It's about the people that serve the intelligence agencies of the United States.
He's like, the script is me hitting you over the head with the folding chair. Will you please get on board with this? And she's like, I am not doing that. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, you can just fuck right off because Ed Snowden is a goddamn hero. The guy exposed the government who were the ones that were violating the Constitution, not him. He's not a traitor. The definition of a traitor says that he was aiding our enemies. He was not. He was probably the most careful whistleblower in history.
Right.
He made sure that only certain things were released of all the information that he gathered because he didn't want to actually get anyone
compromise the country.
Yep, and get anyone in harm's way. And all he did was expose this thing that they said that they weren't doing, spying on Americans. He fucking exposed it. So the guy's a goddamn national treasure, and she did make it out of committee, so now the whole Senate is going to vote on whether or not to.
Oh, she did. I thought she got denied, but
no,
I'm not following in this.
I could be wrong about that, but she and RFK,
RFK like 13-14 or something.
Yeah,
just barely squeaked by.
I'm pretty sure they both made it out of committee.
Yeah, so. I don't know. I have such little faith and trust in any of these processes, but big one is health. I mean, our country is fucking dying. And to just have a guy like RFK, and I'm not saying I'm all in on RFK, but to at least be having the conversation that 40% of teenagers are pre-diabetic. We eat a plastic credit card's worth of plastic every week as Americans. Our food is poison. Like we have no. That was like one of the biggest like awakening moments during the COVID thing. We're not going to let you guys go running outside, go surfing at the beach. You know what I mean? We're going to close down the parks. We're going to shut you in your house for public health, for your own safety. I'm like, it was like one of the first, like right off the bat, I'm like, I'm just not buying any of this shit. And to have someone at least having the conversation, our food is fucking poisoning. Like why, when you go to the grocery store, why is there a health food section? It's one little end cap. Like that's ridiculous.
And RFK is not actually trying to ban any of that stuff.
Yes.
There's nothing you can really say about him. He wants people to know what's going on. He wants investigations into the drugs that were being prescribed, the vaccines, air quotes, that were being given. He's not saying that you can't do them. He said in his hearing, he's like, my boss loves to eat Big Macs and drink Diet Coke.
Yeah.
I'm not banning that. People can do that if they want to, but people need to know exactly what's going into their bodies and what's going into the propaganda around that food that's being paid for by pharmaceutical companies, by and large, and the food industry. And they're using that money. What they're paying for is government regulation, making it so that we all end up eating that food. Eat it if you want to, but you need to know what's actually happening.
And so you're reliant on the last 20 years of your life taking pharmaceutical products, and that ag lobby and the pharmaceutical, they even use the same lobbyist to get some of these bills across.
That's more efficient.
Yes. We know the government loves efficiency. So do you know who Whitney Webb is?
Yeah.
Okay. She released 2 books, One Nation Under Blackmail. There's 1 and 2 parts. The first one is the second one is about Jeffrey Epstein, which we've gone through ad nauseum on this podcast. And the first one is about how does Jeffrey Epstein become Jeffrey Epstein? He was put there by other people. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end, she goes, now what is Jeffrey Epstein is dead. So did we just stop this whole thing, or is there a Jeffrey Epstein 2.0? Mm-hmm. And she goes, what is that next kind of thing? So I started looking deeper and deeper into this stuff.
It'd be hard to imagine that Jeffrey Epstein was the only one doing Jeffrey Epstein too.
Right. In fact, I would argue that Jeffrey Epstein wasn't he was a mid-level manager.
Yeah.
He was just something that these kind of power processes went through.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I tried this with Jake. It was actually kind of fun. So give me the elevator pitch about who was Jeffrey Epstein. What do we know?
He was a person whose
Jake
job
said, "Give me your elevator pitch." And I went on for like 20 minutes. He goes, "That's your elevator pitch?" I'm like, "Well, it's out of service. We're stuck in between floors here."
He is someone whose job was basically to compromise powerful people and then through video and audio recording, use that compromised position that they found themselves in, which in his case was having sex with underage girls, against them to blackmail them.
Yeah, a sexual blackmail ring. And then the more you look into it, like you're like, ooh, that's the thing that's most fascinating that grabbed everyone's attention. That's only kind of part of what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because we spent a lot of time talking about like the surveillance state that we had talked, he brought the Tulsi Gabbard stuff, and she's close to over the target and everyone's coming after her. Now there's a very succinct reason for that. So, because if you look at, like at first glance, when you look at, you don't have to do much digging, but we've done this before, so I won't go through it too much, but Jeffrey Epstein had some very clear connections to the Mossad, right? Israeli intelligence. The most obvious one being his partner in crime was Ghislaine Maxwell, whose dad was Robert Maxwell, who was very open about who worked for the Mossad,
right,
running sexual blackmail operations until his unfortunate demise in 1991, when he woke up in his $50 million yacht to take a pee, walked past the multiple bathrooms to pee off the bow, and fell overboard and drowned mysteriously. But there's another layer to kind of the Jeffrey Epstein story, and like this one kind of surpasses that of kind of the sexual blackmail operation. And this is when you get into the technocrat oligarchs of Silicon Valley and financial crimes. And I think this is like why he was really put in that place. Now like I said, he's just like a mid-level manager. He's kind of facilitating these kind of blackmail operations. But it goes back, we have to look at the timeline of Jeffrey Epstein, because he was arrested for the sexual blackmail stuff multiple times and let go every time. And then is either ABC or NBC, this journalist does like a huge article, like this is gonna be a breakthrough piece, just about to release it. The CEO of that company goes like, absolutely not. You're not releasing that. And she's like, what the hell? So she became a whistleblower, and like no one covered it at all, right? And she starts going like, why does this guy keep getting released? Like, he's so obviously guilty. He's connected to like all this stuff. And no one seems to be willing to listen to the story. So, and then you add another layer to the Jeffrey Epstein story, is that when you realize that like literally any, how do you put this? Like any tech platform, social media, any internet technology that we use can be tied back to what you call the blob, right? The blob is also known as the mob. Now, to clear something up, when you look at the work by Whitney Webb, dark journalist, Charlie Robinson, Clint Russell, even Dave Smith, when they talk about the mob, there's this misunderstanding, because most people, when you say the mob, they think it's what?
The Italian mafia.
Italian mafia. It's not. The Italian mafia is the mafia. The mob is the Jewish mafia, which goes back to Israel, which brings us back to the ties from Jeffrey Epstein going back to the Mossad to Israel. And as we've brought up before in this podcast, like it's crazy how when you start pulling names and looking at the CEO of this and this and this and this and this and this, it's like it always ends up tying back to the Mossad and Israel, which is interesting and hard to ignore. So,
especially if you're the president of the United States, yes. Really hard to ignore Israel.
Yes. So here we are today. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. And so we asked, like, since the growth of the surveillance state has not dwindled in any capacity, I'm sure you would agree with that, we have to ask, who is the new Jeffrey Epstein? Because once you tie him into these kind of technocrats and the oligarchs of Silicon Valley, developing all this software and technology that we use every day, and we see a growth in the surveillance state, you have to ask, like, is there a connection between these two things? And there is. And so when we think about, like, who is Jeffrey Epstein, the new Jeffrey Epstein, dude, I think it's Tom Cochran, author of
I knew it.
90s hit Life is a Highway. So
it all comes in full circle.
He starts Red Ryder in the 80s, right? And he needs money. Okay, I'm just fucking with No, Epstein 2.0 is not a person.
Okay.
It's technology. It's software. And
that makes sense.
When you look at the connections that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had and the people they brought into their orbit and then the way they all work together and then go back another layer.
Yeah, these sick fucks that would go to Jeffrey Epstein's island were not only
sexual
deviants when they were on the island, right? They're obviously like totally just damaged and flawed individuals. I mean, you just look at a picture of our American senators. It's a murderer's row, no pun intended, of just fucked up individuals. Right? Mm-hmm. Those people are doing that fucked up shit, whether they're on his island or not. So if there is surveillance of them during their day-to-day lives, then you're going to get that same fucked up shit.
So think of it like this, and I'll explain this here in a roundabout way, but Jeffrey Epstein was, like I was saying, kind of mid-level management, but so much so that he was basically that Home Depot employee. When you go to Home Depot and you go to pay, what do? We self-checkout. But we still have the guy there going like, yeah, that machine that's slowly replacing me, just go use that over there.
Right.
That was Jeffrey Epstein. I'll explain how.
Okay.
Because Epstein was a key figure in like with all these various tech companies, but no one could figure out like what he did or why he was there. And he was, okay, so we brought up the notion of like the public-private partnership, right? And this is what we would understand to become the modern surveillance state. I'll explain that. So when you think of like public-private partnership, think private tech company either started or absorbed by our intelligence agencies, but almost all of these tech companies coming out of Silicon Valley, going back to the mid, even early, but Epstein pops up in like the mid to late 90s. They're all, and we've done a few of these before, but they can all be tied back to In-Q-Tel, which is what? The venture capital firm of the CIA.
Right.
And then they have a working relationship with Israeli intelligence. Making sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you think of like a timeline, because to run the world's largest sexual blackmail ring, which I'd argue Jeffrey Epstein was doing, which was the calling card of the Mossad, which is what Robert Maxwell did. It ties Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, to Robert Maxwell, to the Mossad. It's like you need private jets, a penthouse in Manhattan. You need Epstein Island. You need your sprawling ranch in Santa Fe where the world's wealthiest people can unwind for the weekend and talk about eugenics, things like that. And then you start pulling in whack job Hollywood celebrities. Like it's a big, expensive, like messy operation, right? And this is done in large part with a lot of these like tech moguls who are giving him all the money to facilitate this kind of lifestyle and create this kind of infrastructure of bringing in all these tech oligarchs into his orbit, and who were all hanging out together for some reason, all centered around Jeffrey Epstein, which made no sense to people at the time. Mm-hmm. Because you go into, okay, I don't want to jump just there yet, but then you look at some of these like tech platforms and this technology. So this would be your Oracle, your Google, your Facebook, your Palantir, all this Silicon Valley technology that's being developed and, was exploding in value, people making millions of dollars. And Jeffrey Epstein was facilitating like the hangout of kind of all these people together. And then you got to think about, okay, have you ever heard of the Pegasus software?
Yeah, you brought it up. I can't remember what it is.
So the Pegasus software was made by an Israeli cybersecurity firm. And what it did, it was create the backdoor. So anyone using an Android and iOS phone, they could get into your phone. They could not only follow every keystroke, all your online activity, any transaction you made, remember the whole antiquated notion of like, that we used to joke 12 years ago? Like, dude, I think my phone's listening to me. Now we just take that as a given.
Right.
So even that conversation that you're having with your wife while your phone is quietly charging on the counter, that's Pegasus. And that's just one of the software kind of programs that can do this. Even down to your fucking Roomba.
Which will map your house.
Will map your house. And so the Jeffrey Epstein, the sexual blackmail ring, which is extremely expensive and extremely messy and creates a lot of like loose ends and volatile personalities and a lot of people and draws a lot of attention, so much so that he finally ends up going to jail. After over a decade from his first arrest, when they actually, like, everything came out on it, is that becomes kind of an antiquated notion. Because what's he trying to do? He's trying to get dirt on the most powerful people in the world, right? By having this huge, expensive infrastructure.
Right.
But once we have this kind of digital infrastructure.
When you say we, you mean Israel?
No, you and me. Sexual blackmail.
Oh, good. Okay. Finally, we'll be able to fund this podcast.
Is once you have the digital infrastructure in place, well, you don't need this sexual blackmail operation anymore.
Right.
Because I can run surveillance and Pegasus is just one of these software programs that they used, is once you have something like that where I have a back door into all this technology, everyone's computer and everyone's phone, and your Roomba, for example, I can do, one of a couple things. I have so maybe you have like some kind of bizarre sexual kink that I have a record of. Maybe you're having an affair that I have a record of. Maybe you are the most squeaky clean person ever, right? I'm trying to blackmail you, right? Hypothetically. You've done nothing wrong.
Correct.
You've run a perfect life.
Yes.
But I need you to do this thing or stop doing this other thing or vote on this certain thing or shut up about this other thing online. What would I do? I have access to your phone, your computer, everything. 2 ways. I'm not just looking at what you're doing, but I can
control what you're doing.
I can put something on there.
Right.
Anything come to mind?
I'd rather not say.
Yes, please don't. It's referred to as CP. I can put something highly illegal. I can find dirt. We can find dirt on anybody. But even if I can't, I'll just make the dirt. And what's easier? Can I do that with the press of a button?
Right.
Or if I'm using Pegasus in Israel? Yeah, that's a lot easier than giving this random dude who has no background in finance, no background in technology, no background in security, anything, a private jet and an island and a townhouse in Manhattan and his own ranch in Santa Fe. It's like, whoa, we just kind of streamlined the process. So that cybersecurity firm was called the NSL Group, which you can look up. Mm-hmm. And they got a lot of pushback. They're once we found out about the Pegasus software, and everyone said this is ridiculous. This is a complete invasion of privacy. They said well, no, we have to do that because we're trying to fight, I guess,
terrorism.
Yeah, it's either that or climate change. So, which to tie some things together is the same model that they used after 9/11 with the Patriot Act, which never went away. Not only has not gone away, but it's just been enhanced year by year by year by year because it's keeping us safer. And what the Patriot Act did is not combat terrorism. It was to run profiles and surveillance on all Americans, on everybody. That's what the Patriot Act was about. And now that we've adopted since 9/11 more and more technology in our lives with our smartphones and everything's more online based, it's this is kind of the continuation of the Patriot Act, but now we're doing it. We can tie 9/11 and Israel together on another episode, but same cast of characters, same time, same playbook every time.
It's worth maybe even doing it on this episode because I don't want to end without talking about what just went down with Trump and Israel.
So this kind of explains that bizarre kind of sycophant relationship between Israel and anyone sitting in a significant seat of power, which you brought up. This goes from the Clintons to the Bushes to Obama to Elon Musk to Trump to RFK to Bernie Sanders. Everyone has an understanding that the U.S. is so deeply intertwined with Israel and their intelligence agencies, it would be political suicide to start barking about it. That you're not going to get that job by doing that. You have to play ball.
Or you will face the consequences.
This web. Right.
Which, if you're a real man, you would say, fuck your consequences. This is the right thing to do. I'm going to do it anyways.
And it's mind-boggling to see like how many of these people and companies, to go back to the tech oligarchs, all have a connection to Jeffrey Epstein and the CIA and Israel. Like one by one, all the major ones that we see. And so what's terrifying, this is the scariest thing, is that now that the latest project of these public-private partnerships is to employ current AI technology. And they're going to do this in conjunction with the Israeli-created Pegasus software or something like that. I mean, there are several different versions of this technology.
Well, do you remember we talked about Paragon Solutions once, who was the company that ICE signed a contract with to do biometric surveillance of the border and beyond in the United States?
All part of the same thing. And what their new thing is to use pattern recognition, and they're going to monitor online behavior, social media, maybe even private texts, which they can do with this software, or even something a conversation that you're having with your wife when you think your phone's off. And what they're doing is they're trying to build profiles and predict behavior in anyone using this technology to predict something that you might be alluding to down the road.
Pre-crime,
also known as pre-crime. That's the next move, which should scare the shit out of anyone.
They have even used the term pre-crime. These people are not opposed to the idea of...
They are not opposed to telling you exactly what they plan to do. Right. Some of them even have websites. Peter Thiel, Ambrosia. We want to harvest the blood of the young to stave off the effects of aging. Like, where'd you get that? They have a website. It's right here. You can read everything that they're doing. So, and the reason that these public-private partnerships are established is because it provides a layer of deniability, which we're going to get into USAID, which is all the outrage of the week. But this creates a layer of deniability from what you refer to as the blob, right?
I got that from Michael Benz, by the way.
Okay. Or the CIA, just one example. So to bring things more current, like we were talking about USAID, or any NGO, for example, like we brought this back to like private military contracting firms. Like, we don't have boots on the ground in Ukraine. I'm like, well, we do. They just don't officially work for the army. They retired early from, the Marines or whatever, and now they're being paid by a private contracting firm. That money is still coming from the taxpayer, so now you're paying for two armies at this point. And another downside is like they're not beholden to like the rules of engagement of the U.S. military, for example.
Yeah.
And so when you say like any NGO, for example, or like they simply use this buffer layer to spread money, power, influence. So that non-NGO face of whatever war, pandemic, covert op, or blackmail ring, when they get hauled in front of Congress, in front of like maybe a Rand Paul or Thomas Massey, and saying like, do you know anything about this? This would be the actual official government organization. They're like, nope. Like, you guys didn't do this at all? Like, no, because they have that extra, that buffer layer. This just recently happened because now, okay, so let's skip around a little bit. How familiar are you with like the USAID stuff?
Pretty familiar.
Okay.
Which
let's clear
obviously is in the news right now, but we were talking about it.
Fucking hilarious. We've been talking about it like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Talking about USAID, which is hilarious because the amount of outrage you see on like a Twitter, for example, I'm like, it's the new Ukraine. I was like, you have never heard of that a week ago. And like now you have like very, very strong opinions. Like, you didn't know Ukraine was a country. You've never heard of USAID. Okay, so let's clear a couple things up for you. We can lop off 70% of the outrage just by sheer ignorance. And like, half of this outrage is coming from an emotional knee jerk of people saying like, no, it's USAID. No, it's USAID. It's not aid. Like, you're thinking of UNICEF, dummy.
UNICEF.
You're thinking of the Red Cross. We're not sending money to starving children.
Exactly.
Africa. That's just not what the USAID does.
AID does spell aid. That's not what it stands for.
It stands for U.S. Agency for International Development.
I love this too. So, I tweeted that was USAID a program helping millions of poor or vital to our national security interests? I don't see how both can be true because Congressman Eugene Windham said, my colleagues and I were just denied entry to USAID headquarters on the orders of President Trump and Elon Musk. Shutting down USAID.
Okay, that's not true. But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Shutting down USAID is unlawful, inhumane, and a gift to adversaries like Russia and China. I will not stop fighting to protect American national security interests. I thought it was a program to help poor starving kids in Angola. How is that a gift to our adversaries like Russia and China and a threat to our national security interests? You can't have it both ways. That's obviously what it is. It's a total, we've said it before on this podcast. It's a fucking front for CIA operations around the world.
Yeah, so what the CIA did, because now when people think CIA, they're like, ooh, they've got some pretty dirty hands. They've just outsourced what they do to USAID and the NED, among other National Endowment for Democracy. You got to love these names that they give themselves. Also, Elon Musk and Trump didn't shut down the USAID. What they said is they were going to conduct an audit. And USAID said, like, nope, we're not giving you anything. And they're like, okay, now we're shutting you down. That's two different things.
Yeah.
And if you looked at what USAID does, it would make your fucking head spin. They funded a Peruvian transgender comic book, Serbian DEI initiatives, gay Colombian opera, $11 million to bring Sesame Street to Iraq. Like, just the waste is insane. But now the waste...
Yeah, it looks like waste on its face.
Yeah.
But that's not what they're doing in those countries. They don't actually think that Sesame Street needs to be in some Middle Eastern country. And even if they did, the money that's involved, like, obviously that's not what they're doing there. Right? It doesn't take a genius to realize that.
Yes. And the core issue that seems to conveniently get glossed over is Doge wanted to conduct an audit on USAID after they discovered this is not the waste. This is money that cannot be accounted for. Somewhere between $200 and $500 billion. So that's not
Sesame Street.
Yeah, that's not someone asking questions like, why do you need $11 million to bring Big Bird to Iraq? Like, right. Seems like we could do that for like 600. Like, this is money that they have
no tag.
This
on.
is the Donald Rumsfeld, like, there's $2.3 trillion missing from the Pentagon. Like, I don't know. They're going to study it in this office over here. Oh, fuck, a plane hit it tomorrow. That's not even counting the wasteful program. This is money that you guys are just missing. Right. That's why we're doing an audit.
Right.
Like, that's the issue. And it's hilarious to watch that, to throw an issue like this out here and to see the statists come out of the woodwork, but they don't think they know that they're throwing all their cards on the table, because people are like freaking out. Like, you can't just like go in, and start firing people. Like, if you're in the private sector, I'm worried about getting fired every day. Mm-hmm. Every day, my job is on the chopping block. If I don't,
I wish I would get fired every single day.
Yes, you've been trying. And so now it's hilarious. It's like when they kind of say the quiet part out loud. So yeah, like Chuck Schumer will come out and say, like, if we let Doge, attack USAID, like, what's next? Do you want to audit the IRS? And we're like, yeah.
No, please don't. We need our beautiful IRS. I was like, are you sure you want to lead with the IRS? Isn't there? I think maybe that should have been your last example.
Let's go with like Department of Education, because there's like some emotional things.
Kids, you want to help them? The IRS? Yeah, fuck yeah, audit the IRS.
What's next? Auditing cars for kids. Yes, they're on the chopping block. Who wrote that fucking song? But to go back to the public-private partnerships and these like kind of purposely manufactured layers of accountability that I was talking about, like, since we were talking about USAID, like, we also, so here's a perfect example that we found. They gave like millions and millions of dollars that went to a lab in,
Wuhan, China,
to fund
Gain of function research.
Okay, and so when Fauci gets hauled in front of Congress and Rand Paul goes, did you fund gain of function research? He says, what?
No.
Under oath, right?
Yep.
Now, the reason he can do that is because that money went from the taxpayer to USAID, this is real, to UC Davis, to EcoHealth Alliance, to the lab in Wuhan. So technically, Fauci did not fund gain of function research. That's why they have these different layers. This is what the USAID does.
And we would not know that if it weren't for Doge digging into this.
And
because we've been on that for a while, like talking about that, but we had no idea that that was the line of the money. That's how it bounced around before it got to Wuhan.
And to keep in mind, just like the episode we did on the private military contracting firms, is when it goes through all these layers, because we go like $11 million to bring Sesame Street to Iraq. It seems low. Is it has to go through these layers, and each one of those layers is taken a little bit. That's why they exist. That's how you fund these different layers. So you're paying X percent more than that thing would actually cost for something that you don't want anyway. It's also illegal. And in the case of gain of function research, that you paid 400% more than you normally would have to have your kid miss out on 2 years of learning at school.
Right.
See how this is working so far?
Yeah, it's working great.
Right. So to go back to these public-private partnerships, and so we were talking about Jeffrey Epstein, since everyone was fascinated with like the sexual blackmail operations and their attention kind of stopped there, unfortunately, you can see a pattern that Epstein and Maxwell, going back to the late 90s, they began to court all the major technocratic oligarchs of that time, right? And there's a reason for that. So this is going back to the 80s. So you have your Bill Gates, Microsoft, Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn, Elon Musk, PayPal, Larry Ellison, Oracle, Jeff Bezos, Amazon, Larry Page, and Sergey Brin, Google, Peter Thiel from Palantir, and Ambrosia, the harvesting of the blood. I highly suggest going to their website, by the way.
Sounds fun.
So all these people are kind of connected to each other, which in turn connects them to all the various CIA programs, which we have done a few like here and there. And all those go back to all having a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, right? And because at that time, like, you'd have these high profile elite society events, right? And there'd be a journalist there. And you can read their accounts online. And they go to these swanky, like, top 0.01% of society parties. They'd be like, okay, who's that guy? Bill Gates. Oh, he owns Microsoft. Makes sense. So he's here. Who's that guy? Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn. Got it. Who's that? Peter Thiel. He did PayPal. Him and Elon Musk developed PayPal together. They're part of the PayPal mafia. I was working on this new project called Peter Thiel. Like, okay. Or called Palantir. Okay, that makes sense. Like, who's that guy? Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, this is his party. This is his place. And like, I thought this was Reid Hoffman's $40 million penthouse in Manhattan. He goes, oh, it was. He gave it to Jeffrey Epstein. He's hosting this party. And so people start asking questions about Jeffrey Epstein. This is like back in the late 90s. And they go, I don't know anything about this guy. Apparently he works at Bear Stearns, but now I'm interviewing people from Bear Stearns and like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He has no background in finance. All I know is that people are giving him tons and tons of money. The most powerful people in the world just keep giving like billions of dollars, but I have no idea why, right? This begins like the Epstein saga. And this Epstein guy is connected with like all the most powerful people in the world at this point. And he seems to be kind of aggressively getting everyone together and, you know, going to his island and going to the ranch in Santa Fe and, you know, the whole thing. And from there, once you start looking at those connections, like they never stop. So we've done this on other episodes, but the CIA's project Oracle became Oracle. Larry Ellison with the CIA doing Oracle, quits the CIA, does Oracle, the company, and then gets the no-bid contract to run U.S.-based TikTok under Project Texas. But what do we always say about anyone who's worked for the CIA?
They always will work for the CIA.
You don't do a summer internship at the CIA.
Can't quit the CIA. Now you can't leave.
So this goes back before all this stuff happened. The CIA, what they originally called the Total Information Awareness. Now, this would be kind of the umbrella that would become Oracle, that would become LifeLog, Project LifeLog, which would become Facebook. You know, they shut Project LifeLog down, and a month later, Facebook is unveiled unto the world, which does the exact same thing that Project LifeLog did. All this falls under the umbrella of the Total Information Awareness kind of ethos that the CIA was working with at that time. Now, when you look at who all these like technocrats that were associated with Jeffrey Epstein at that point, and then you make the connections of how they all kind of funded each other, and then you can pretty easily draw, connect the dots, and they all go back to the CIA, which all is a working kind of partnership with Israel and the Mossad, right? So here's an example. Who is Peter Thiel? He made his money with PayPal, with Elon Musk and a couple other people. They refer to him as the PayPal Mafia. Now, he takes that money and he starts Palantir, right? Which is a software like data harvesting company. And at that time, now we have a record that all of his engineers every 2 weeks were flying to Langley, Virginia. Their main client was the CIA. They're flying to Langley, Virginia, and the CIA was helping them tweak their software and how it was going to work and how it was going to collect data. This became Palantir. And then you had Operation LifeLog, which shuts down. And then Facebook starts. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, he actually starts Facebook organically. At least that's what we're being told. But now he wants to take it to this next level. He needs a bunch of money. Who funds that? Peter Thiel funds money he made from PayPal. And he takes that money and he funds Facebook. So that connects Facebook to Peter Thiel, whose main client is the CIA at that point. So we have 2 lines going from Facebook, Peter Thiel, all going back to the CIA. Because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't get a check from the CIA, takes it into his bank, says DBA, Central Intelligence Agency, and tries to cash it. No, he gets money from Peter Thiel, who got his money. All this goes through Incutel, which is the venture capital firm of the CIA. Making sense so far?
Yeah.
So then once you realize that all these projects were being funded through Incutel and the CIA, working with Israel, and for example, using that Pegasus software that I was talking about, which creates that kind of backdoor, this kind of two-way mechanism for surveillance, for example, is all these people were brought together by Jeffrey Epstein at that point. And this is kind of answers the question. Everyone's like, I can't figure out what his role in this kind of process is. And then you bring up what is one of the biggest things for us as it pertains to freedom and personal autonomy was one of the biggest things to worry about.
Biometric surveillance?
Or CBDC, same thing.
Oh, CBDC, yeah. Yeah, same thing, yeah.
So you think about PayPal, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, amongst others, that was one of the greatest leaps forward ever for the CBDC, right?
Totally.
And you look at all this kind of total information awareness, this is all a push. CBDC is just kind of part of the equation. It's a complete erosion of any personal autonomy, beginning with your financial transactions to your personal privacy to what you look at online, who you talk to, everything. This is all kind of rolled into one. And when you look at each of these technocratic products, they all seem to perfectly align with a pre-existing CIA program, which gets shut down and then goes into a public-private partnership. So perfect example would be Project Oracle with Larry Ellison, as brought up. You look at what all these kind of products do, and these all go back to CIA programs. been trying to do under total information awareness, been trying to do this forever. That we just kind of outsourced it to the private sector. All the way back into the early 90s, like once all these technocratic surveillance, kind of dystopian, authoritarian wet dreams, once that infrastructure is in place and the unwashed masses kind of willingly adopted it into their own life under their own volition, as opposed to that, like the perfect example would be Operation LifeLog. And we're like, no one's gonna sign on to the CIA's website. And like, what about if it's called Facebook and this dork in his dorm room in Stanford or Harvard or wherever he went made it? They're like, oh yeah, I'll do that and upload all my photos and everything. And because of these public-private kind of partnerships, In-Q-Tel, much like the USAID, which is like the hot kind of topic this week, they funnel money through these 4 different layers. Like now they have kind of culpability. So if anyone drags someone from the intelligence agencies in front of Congress and like saying like, hey, this congressman, started asking questions about why are we sending $7 billion to Israel, and now he's claiming that someone planted some highly illegal stuff on his laptop, and they go like, nah, that wasn't us.
Right.
There it is.
It's ingeniously devious to switch from the cumbersome project of Jeffrey Epstein to just going like, we don't need him. No, we'll just use people's phones.
Well, they did need him.
Not anymore, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the kind of the point. They needed him to facilitate all of these tech oligarchs to create this infrastructure. And he got arrested. Think of the timeline. He gets arrested gets arrested over and over and over, or let go every time. And then finally it gets to the point where now all this technology has become such a large part of our lives, all the way down to your weather app is tracking like where you go through your phone, right? And it gets to the point where now that the infrastructure is in place and he gets busted and enough people are paying attention to it, they have him killed.
Yeah, like your work is done.
Yeah, you're done. This whole sexual blackmail operation, that's like kind of old technology, so to speak. Like now,
and it's
push a button, we can just put it on your phone. We'll find out what you did, or if you didn't do anything, we'll just make something up and put it on your computer.
It's very leaky. You're relying on a human being to, coordinate everything.
Right.
Not let the secret out.
It's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
A lot of loose ends, a lot of people asking questions.
A lot of points of failure.
This is why we're never going to see the Epstein client list, by the way. There's no way.
Yeah.
Because anyone that asks any questions are like, sure you want to do that?
Right.
Mr. Congressman with a Grindr account that no one knows about.
Do you think that Donald Trump has been compromised by Israel?
Yes.
Do you think that everyone in his cabinet who is a adamant supporter of Israel has also been compromised?
I think either yes, or they don't have a sufficient amount of power to really make any kind of substantial change.
It could also be that they realize the threat of Israel and don't want to put themselves at odds with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that they know they're not high enough in the strata to kind of to be brought into that back room and go like, listen, this is how this whole thing works. But they know how it works, and they know like, okay, I got to stay in line here.
The threat of Israel is enough to keep them in line.
Right.
What would you say? I don't want to let this go without talking about the stuff in the news. 'Cause we started out talking about Twitter and how just insane everyone is right now over what's happened since Donald Trump's come into office. What would your report card be up till today of Donald Trump's presidency?
Like a B minus B.
Okay.
Yeah.
Donald Trump promised a lot of shit this time around.
As he did in 2016.
Exactly. And so far, he has made good on just about everything he said he was going to do.
He did come out swinging.
So he said that he was going to cut the federal government. He's done that way more than I thought he would.
Yeah, some of the things he's done, I've been pretty surprised about.
He said that he was going to appoint certain people to positions of power, which he did.
Mm-hmm.
RFK Jr., Tulsi, Kash Patel, Jay Bhattacharya. So far, I think so good. I felt like he should have fought for Matt Gaetz harder, but maybe Matt Gaetz actually did just kind of back out. He said he was going to free Ross Ulbricht.
That was huge for me.
He did.
Yeah.
He also said that he was going to end all the wars.
I love the backlash against, like, because there's this weird, the TDS operates at such a level that like anything that he says or does, it's like, no, it's the opposite. And so he frees Ross Ulbricht, and then the narrative becomes like Ross Ulbricht was selling drugs that killed people all
literally selling heroin to children.
You're like, Ross Ulbricht never sold drugs.
Right.
That's not what he did.
He literally never sold any drugs to anyone.
Yes.
So I have been like kind of amazed with what he's done so far. I think that going after USAID, like we talked about, is just insane. That's like the belly of the beast.
Whether he actually achieves any substantial change or not, I think one of the most valuable things that I think just within the zeitgeist, and this goes back to the Ukraine thing, like I've been doing dives on USAID for several years, and you and I have talked about it before, that's an organization that no one knew existed. That name never came out of their mouth. And now at least people are paying attention to it. They're paying attention to the waste, the fraud. So I think just as we always say, like sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. I'm like, at least people are having that conversation about this. Now, where they land on that conversation has been comical and hilarious. Like, it's aid. It's like it goes to food to starving children. I'm like, okay, just go to their website. Start there.
Right.
Just go to their website.
Look at what USAID actually stands for.
Like even what they claim to be doing is ridiculous.
And now they're talking about going after the Department of Education, which I think is fantastic and brave too, not to use that loaded term, but it's like the cherished government organization because it's for the children, right? Like nobody wants to get rid of the Department of Education because it's to educate our children, even though it's had the exact opposite effect. In 1970, we were the highest ranking educational system in the world. And in 1979, we implemented the Department of Education, and we've gone downhill ever since. Just like everything we've done. We implemented the war on drugs, drugs went through the roof. We implemented the war on poverty, poverty went through the roof.
War on terror,
terror goes through the roof.
Here's just sit down for this, NPCs. The Department of Education is not educating your children. That's right. That's not what they do.
It is getting extremely wealthy.
Yes.
Since 1979, the funding for the Department of Education has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Test scores have gone down.
Yeah. They are a perfect inverse of each other.
So he promised all that stuff, and I was like, he's not going to do it, right? But we voted for him basically on one point, that he was anti-war. In 2016, he did make pretty good on that promise.
He didn't start any new wars.
By not starting any new wars, right. Which I thought if he's going to do anything, it's going to be more of that, more of 2016. Turns out he did everything he said he was going to do. Just like raping and pillaging the federal government, which is fantastic from my point of view. But then fucking last night.
The Skaza thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. That one, it's been a litany of surprises. When I was like, man, he's kind of getting after it. I was like, I'm not like I'm not a Trump supporter. But him looking to at least audit things like the USAID, the NED, looking at the Department of Education, just looking at like waste and bloat and corruption. Like it's just high time that we have done that. And I was surprised. I was like, wow, like I don't know if this is him or if this is Elon Musk. And I love this. People go like, we didn't elect Elon Musk. It's like, well, I didn't elect the fucking CIA and the FBI either. Yet here we are.
Right.
Or the IRS, which has added 88,000 armed new employees under the Biden administration. But when he did the Gaza thing, I've seen two sides to this, which has been kind of interesting. Okay.
We'll take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
So what are the two perspectives you've heard on it?
Okay. So the first one, which is one I fell prey to, I was like, no. Like, this is what you told us, not him, but say the blob. This is what you told us about Iraq. This is what you told us about Syria. This is what you told us about Afghanistan. This is what you told us about Afghanistan, Pakistan, the list goes on, right? We're not going to go in there and fix things.
No, they're going to greet us as liberators.
Right. We're going to spread democracy and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the other side to this that I heard a kind of a counter to that from someone that has a pretty good track record in my mind. They're saying, like, Israel is on the complete war footing to destroy Palestine, right? Focusing on the Gaza Strip. Now, if we fill that area with Americans, Israel being our 51st state, they're going to well, we can't just conduct wanton bombing campaigns because there's going to be a bunch of American soldiers in there. This would, in effect, protect the Palestinians that are there.
But he's talking about taking all the Palestinians and moving them to Egypt and Syria and Lebanon, and just
which up till now has had a wall, if you will, to not let them enter those countries.
Plus, what if they say no? We're not going.
There's that too.
You're just going to say, okay, never mind then. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, think about it.
No, you're going to fucking bomb the shit out of them some more. You're going to go in there with the military. The only way to get rid of them is to violently and forcefully remove them from there. They're not just going to walk out of there. They would have done that already. And if this is such a great idea, why doesn't Israel just do this?
That'd be like Canada coming to this house and saying, like, we're going to move you to Mexico. I'd be like, no.
Right.
No, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, but your city's been bombed.
But if they bomb my house.
Yeah. Well, even if they did, they bomb Santa Rosa, destroy our town, and they say, you guys got to go. You got to go move to Mexico. Fuck you. I'm not moving. I'll fix it. I'll stay here and fix it.
I don't know. After this weather, dude. I mean,
it wasn't that warm in Mexico.
That's very true.
I don't know, dude. I see this as a total fucking disaster.
That's where I'm leaning towards.
I don't see how this is any different from Iraq.
Yeah.
They're not going to greet us as liberators. They're not going to want to go. We're going to have to forcefully remove them, which is what Israel wanted in the first place. They want Gaza. I don't know if you've looked into how much natural resources are actually off the coast of Gaza, but they have tons of oil there. They have tons of minerals in that area. Israel wants it. We're going to clear it out. And whether it's us or Israel who occupies it, what's the difference? We do everything that Israel tells us to do.
I believe, well, and vice versa. And I believe after everything that I just said, there's no difference between Israel and the U.S. They're the same people.
I think this is a total betrayal of everyone that voted for Donald Trump, who voted for him for his anti-war stance. Yeah. This is exactly the opposite. I don't think you can call this anything but war.
That's where my intuition definitely lies. Because I heard that other perspective. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I never thought that. I was like, but going back to pattern recognition and the track record, I was like, when have we ever done this and it worked out for the better for anyone?
If you're forcefully,
including America,
if you're forcefully removing Gazans, Palestinians from Gaza, by definition, that's ethnic cleansing and it's war. Because if one person doesn't want to go and you violently remove them, I'm sorry, that's an act of war.
So that's
their home.
So the caveat to the counter that I brought up is the person that I was referring to didn't bring that up. They just said we were going to occupy Gaza. They didn't talk about removing the people that are the Palestinians that are living there. So that's a fundamental difference for sure.
As if occupying that place is going to be any different than occupying all the other places in the Middle East that we've occupied. It's caused more terrorism, hatred of America, American lives being lost. It's a fucking disaster. I can't believe he's doing this. This is such a, and it's just like we were just talking about with how much Israel has influence over our politics. It's exactly what Israel wants, even though a lot of people are pointing to Netanyahu sitting on stage, seeming kind of uncomfortable. Like, I didn't really sign up for this.
Maybe this is because I've done this in like with girlfriends I had. Is you want X, right? And she's not going to go for it, so you have to like leapfrog and ask for something like something way crazier, right? Art of the deal shit.
Yeah.
Somebody's doing that. Like, we're going to take Greenland. I was like, that's ridiculous. You can't take Greenland. Like, and Gaza. Like, that is insane. Like, you are not doing that. Like, it's never worked out before. We've destroyed all these countries. Millions of dead, innocent civilians. Like, absolutely not. We won't do that. Like, okay, we'll just take Greenland. Like, fine. Yeah, just take Greenland.
Yeah, it's 4D chess.
Starts off just a whiskey and wine, or some miles of travel and some real good times, but it ends in a dark corridor where there ain't no windows and there ain't no doors. Well, that's me, just a drinking off this bottle and a drifting out to sea. Oh, that's me, just a sitting here staring and a shaking like a leaf. Oh, that's me, just a leaning on my shovel in this graveyard of dreams. Oh, that's me, just a leaning on my shovel in this graveyard of dreams.